let's jump into it, shall we?
Fantastic. Good enough. And thanks again.
No, you're very welcome. Ladies and gents, thank you for joining us. We've got a very, very, very special guest this evening. I'm actually quietly excited for this one. So thanks for joining us again on the Journey Podcast Live. I'm your host tonight, going solo, and we're bringing in a very wise man. We've got a founder, an author of a fantastic book titled Intelligent Disobedience, The Difference Between Good and Great Leaders. And we're going to dive into the idea of culture and leadership this evening. Mr. Bob McGannon, thanks for joining us, Bob.
My pleasure. Thank you, Nathan. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Now, we had a little bit of correspondence back and forth beforehand. I was intrigued about your elevator pitch, mate. I'm sure you can probably deliver it a lot better than myself, but it brought a smile to my dial. So do you want to give us a quick rundown on who it is you help and how you help them?
So the elevator pitch is this. I teach leaders to be more effective by using techniques that are used to train dogs. And that normally gets a bit of attention when I say that. Intelligent disobedience is not a phrase I made up. Intelligent disobedience comes from the world of seeing eye dogs. And the reality is you do not want the seeing eye dog to obey its master's every command, because they both might get hit by a truck. Right. If picture this, right? You're at a street corner and there's an audible signal for walk and don't walk. And, the audible signal, sign signals walk, and the dog, the master commands the dog to go forward, but there's an electric car turning the corner or pulling out from the curb or whatever the case may be. That's very, very difficult, if not impossible to hear. The dog needs to disobey its master. And the key to this, when you bring it into a leadership concept, is, if you've got good business processes and they work 98% of the time, that's a really good business process, actually, because of all the myriad of possibilities that could come into a system. But what happens with the other two? What decisions do you make as a leader? And what latitude have you provided and guidance have you provided to the people that report to you to deal with those 2% that are not quite going to yield the outcome you expect if you put it through the standard documented process? That's where intelligent disobedience comes in. And the best leaders I've ever worked with or for engage in intelligent disobedience in a very effective way. And it's not anything where you go to work expecting to do this. You're just ready to do this if one of those 2%, just to use a number, ultimately surfaces.
So in a way, there's so much to unpack with that, Bob. I mean, I love all of it.
Sure.
Do you believe that all great leaders need to be great coaches as well? Do they go hand in hand?
I think a great leader has coaching as part of the model as they work with their team. Whether that is if that leader, him or herself, does that coaching, or they're close with someone on the team that can provide that coaching in the proper context, I should say. I think coaching is part of the model of good leadership. Whether it's that actual leader that does that, I don't know that that's necessarily a mandatory piece of that person's toolkit. Just like a lot of things aren't a mandatory piece of a leader's toolkit if they have the smarts to understand that it's a hole and they have someone on their team that can plug that hole for themselves and for the group they lead.
Gotcha. So end of the day, they've got to just be, they have to be resourceful, I guess. And if it's not themselves that are able to provide the coaching, then obviously they put someone in place that can play that role.
Absolutely. If you limit what you can manage to what your skill set is, you're only going to go so far. Right. Yeah. So it's understanding what your limits are and what your capabilities are, and being happy to have somebody else that fulfills, that role that you would do otherwise, potentially, if that was something that it was a skill set of yours, or maybe you just don't enjoy it. I mean, I worked as a senior project manager and program manager and ran some really significant programs. Part of that's financial analysis. Can I do it? Yes. Do I do it? And have I done it? Yes. Is it fun? Not for me. So I'm going to do that to the minimum amount that I absolutely can, which is not necessarily ideal. So one of the first things I'm going to go look for if I'm putting a team together to run a major initiative or run, a company, as I have in 3 different occasions. I've started and run 3 companies. A 4th, if you consider the one I'm running now. I'm always going to look for a person that does those things better than I do, or at least enjoys them, because you're going to get better outcomes.
A's, higher A's, right?
That's it.
What sort of you touched on it briefly before, and let's I guess dive in a little bit more in depth.
Sure.
For our 3 fans and Mum. Hi, Mum. But the idea, from what you've touched on, is the idea empowering your staff or your team to have the confidence in, I guess, thinking outside the box when that 2% arises. So is it a case of having trust and empowering your staff to make the right call when something arises?
Sure. And that trust isn't binary.
Right.
It's not, here's the staff person that can engage in intelligent disobedience and here's the one that can't. I don't think that's appropriate. I think there are probably areas of a business where someone might have the wherewithal and the background and the experience to engage in some intelligent disobedience, and maybe not in others. You might have someone that has a bit of a maturity dealing with some sort of issues and not with others. So in the book, in my intelligent disobedience book, I actually talk about 4 different stages of intelligent disobedience and the characteristics that are required, or I would expect, before I would give someone that degree of latitude. And the first level of intelligent disobedience is still very restricted. It would look something like, Nathan, I'm happy for you to spend more money on this particular item if you can't get a hold of me, as long as you don't exceed the budget by 5%. And, I don't mind you shipping a product to one customer versus another, but don't move the problem. Don't give a problem to one client or customer to solve the problem of another. Make sure that that's not, so you're empowering people with very distinct boundaries. And I think as someone has a greater degree of experience and background, so they understand what the short and long-term risks might be of an act of intelligent disobedience, you can give them more, I don't want to say boundaryless and that it's infinite, but you could put these really hard boundaries and loosen them or take them away and let someone's judgment and experience rule the day.
Okay. And so just on that, is that a judgment call from the individual based on whoever they're giving the boundaries to, or would you prefer to see that as a more restrictive, broad stroke across the team?
So this gets back to a broad stroke for the team assumes that everybody's the same.
Yeah.
And that's where leadership falls over, right? If you're going to presume that everybody's the same, then you're going to get the output or the outcomes associated with everybody being the same. And you're going to have people whose strengths you're not leveraging.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, you have different levels of individual often in an organization, which assumes you can give them a greater or broader sense of responsibility. So that's the first place you'd start. But I think intelligent disobedience is something where, you might even have a very, very good team leader that is absolutely outstanding in the 98% and fails miserably in the 2%.
Yeah.
And you might have somebody else who's okay in the 98% and they really shine in the 2% because they're a very creative thinker and they're good and fast on their feet, where that other team leader might not be. So it's understanding the nature of who you have reporting to you and, giving them that toolkit and the leniency or the flexibility, as you say, to think outside the box or think different places within the box, even to make something happen.
Let's. Sorry, Matt, go on.
No, guys, I was actually talking to a recruiter a couple of weeks ago, who had said to me something interesting about finding the candidate to fit the job, and I went, at what point do you find a really, really good candidate and change the job?
I like that. What would that look like?
Well, this is, I'm not a super duper sports fan. I don't think about sports all the time. Some people do and put a lot of analogies around that.
Mm,
But I think about, there are times I don't mind having an athlete that I could train in what we're going to be exercising and doing,
yeah.
because that athlete in the longer term can do a lot more for my organization than finding someone that looks like this, that has this specific experience, and plug them into here.
Yeah. So the idea of hiring the person and as opposed to hiring the skill sets, because you can teach the skill sets, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
What's your from my limited understanding of your background at this point, Bob? You've clearly had great success in building substantial culture in a number of teams in your career so far. What do you feel is some of the most important, whether it be character traits or things that you try and instill into a team? How do you go about building a great culture when you've got so many different moving variables, different personalities, all the sorts?
Yeah, it certainly is a challenge, and you have to do a lot of listening. I mean, there's two things that I do up front. The first thing is I try to talk to as many people as I possibly can in the organization, and I ask them, what are the three things that are enablers that help them do their job better, and what are the three things that are inhibitors that they have in front of them that make it more difficult to do their job as they envision that they could. And I learn a lot about what's happening in the organization from that. And again, you'll see trends, and you got to focus on those trends. The one thing, and I love it when someone says one thing, but I'll say the first thing, and a primary thing that I seek to do from a cultural standpoint, is take the fear out of the organization. Whatever it is that is causing people to have some form of concern, causes them to hesitate, causes them to get fearful for something that is not going to go their way. I want to understand what that is. And do you have individuals that are fearful because they're in a job they don't have the skills to produce? Yeah, that happens. I'm not saying it doesn't. But a lot of times, because of the pressures of the world that we place on us and how we deal with those pressures as leaders, there's a lot of fear. And I think it's getting worse. I really do think it's getting worse. And someone said something that was really cool. I wish I could take credit for this, but I'm going to spread it. It's like, the leader brings the weather into the organization. Is it going to be calm? Is it going to be sunny? Is it going to be warm? Is it going to be stormy? Are people going to take cover when you walk down the hall? That's the leader. And I actually was talking to someone about that. They said they actually do a weather report every Monday in their staff meeting. Say, this is happening and that's happening. There's going to be a lot of pressure on us Wednesday because these two deadlines are looming. What can we do to improve the weather on Wednesday? It's a brilliant way to look at the effect that you have on people's lives just by what you bring to the office as a leader. And if you can bring less of what's going to cause fear and discomfort and wonder in a bad way, I wonder why he's looking like that, because right. I think the better off you're going to be as an organization. So that's really that, and I think that's fundamental, because we're all human beings. We've all got that, brain stem sort of thing with the fight or flight instinct, and obviously it pops up more readily in some people than in others, but we've got that. We've all got that. And dealing with that and calming the amygdala, I think it is. Calming that down in people, you can create a lot of positive strides doing that. And you get a lot of more trust when you do that. And when you get more trust as a leader, you hear more about what's really going on. particularly if you're smart enough to award people in some sort of way, or at least recognize them when they bring you bad news, because they have to foster the courage to come into your office or write that email and tell you that. And that's something that you want. So really it's that releasing fear so you have room for something else, and hopefully that something else is trust.
Do you tend to see, are we going through a little bit of a transition at the moment? And it's a tough one to judge for myself, because I am, I haven't been in too many leadership positions, but, I get the feeling that we're entering an age where there is a lot more empathy. There's a lot more understanding. There's a lot more vulnerability from, different people in positions of power. And I guess I see some people really struggle with the idea of being transparent and vulnerable and allowing mistakes, and trying to balance that with the interests of the business. So, I mean, how do you see that one playing out at the moment?
Look, I think absolutely. I think this is happening, and I think there's a lot more empathy, but there's also a lot more frustration and anger as well. I mean, I think we're all striving for a return to normalcy. Now we're, you and I being Australia, we're very, very fortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, I have relatives in the U.S. I don't hide my accent all that well, and they don't. There's no end in sight other than the vaccine for them. There's no end in sight with what's happening there. So at least we have some degree of that, and I think that frustration is surfacing. And I think the only thing that you can really truly do to engage someone and take them out of that mode and engage that empathy is compassion. And I think compassion is a step beyond empathy. Empathy is me saying, gee, Nathan, I understand what you've just told me. That's got to be very, very trying. Yeah. And so, I appreciate what you're going through. Well, that's not active. That's empathy. Compassion is, Nathan, boy, it's what you're just going through today. Let me help you. What can I do? It's action oriented compassion. And I think there's really four things that a leader needs to apply to compassion. And this is actually a model that I'm working on with a woman named Gwen Pennington and her team, who's in Tasmania. And we call it companionship. And it's having an equal amount of compassion for the mission of your organization, the people within the organization, the capability of the organization, which means you have to refresh it and train and that sort of thing, and yourself as a leader. You have to have self-compassion. You have to be healthy. You have to be rested. You have to be clear. You have to treat yourself fairly. Or even if you try to have the people that you're working with, try to convince them to treat themselves fairly, or to go home at a reasonable time if they're at work in the office, or to log off and shut the technology off for a while. You don't do that, they're not going to believe necessarily that that's a good thing. They're going to follow your example. They are going to be affected by the weather that you bring right into the organization. So I think it's really important for us to understand that compassion for those four elements needs to be in balance. As soon as you go too strongly, too far on one side of, let's say, having compassion for your business mission, and you don't have enough compassion for the people who are ultimately going to deliver that business mission, fear sets in, productivity goes down, attrition goes up, or you're going to get the I'm afraid to act, so therefore I don't. You're certainly not going to get intelligent disobedience and get those other 2% taken care of. You're going to have an outcome that could have been instead of an outcome that was. Someone had the smarts, someone had the intelligence, someone probably even had the answer, but they're going to be too afraid to act.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot easier to attribute it to the bottom dollar now, right? Like people, I guess business owners can see, it costs X amount of money to train up a new person. If you have to let Helen go for whatever reason, then, you're going to lose time, money, and probably a valuable asset to their business. So it's all correlated.
And the intellectual capital that goes out the door.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't put a price on that. And we don't have no idea what it is, but it's not cheap. It's not cheap. And I don't know anybody that would say, I think that's minimal. But I've never seen even a conservative low estimate on a spreadsheet to calculate the cost of giving people some additional training, giving some additional background, giving them some additional support or different benefit that's going to keep them in the business, because they're going to be more content. They're going to feel as if they belong.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Someone that feels as if they belong in an organization and belong in a group rarely leave.
Yeah.
Rarely leave when you have that mode in place.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. All throughout my life, I pretty much had two rules that I'd tell myself. The day ever came that I had nothing left to learn, or I was wildly unhappy in my position, or it was the day came that both of those things happened at once. Well, then the next day I'd hand my resignation in. Luckily enough, that day has never came. So, Bob, let's take half a step back.
Sure.
For those that have missed it, you do have an American accent.
I do.
So let's go back to your journey to Australia. Like, how did you wind up here?
So, I worked for IBM for 18 years and then started my own business doing project management training and consulting. And through that exercise, I had a 3-week engagement with Vodafone down here and in New Zealand and in Australia, and loved to travel. My lovely bride loves to travel. And we came down here and didn't want to go home. And we'd never had that experience. We've traveled all over the world and said, wow, that was fantastic. We'd love to go there again. But we'd never, ever had this experience about not wanting to go home. And so in an attempt to try to spend more time down here, I was looking for maybe a longer term consulting opportunity. And through a lot of poking around and talking with a migration agent and everything, we were able to get a skilled migration visa from the ACT government to come in and run technology programs. The first of which was I was involved in, I went back to contracted into IBM and was managing the technology that was outsourced to IBM by Medicare. And one of the projects that we put in place during that period of time was the digitization of our Medicare cards.
Wow.
Which I've never seen. I've never had a more public project against which I've been, a factor where I've been part of before. And it's really cool to see whenever, you go to the surgery, you go whatever, and someone takes out the Medicare card and swipes it, to know that it wasn't always like that. And that I was, involved in, the team did the work, but that I was involved in small part in that was really pretty cool.
That's huge.
So that's how I get down here. And the interesting thing is, so I was smitten, Denise was smitten and by Australia. And then when this all came about, my daughter was 20.
Yeah.
And we said, you could stay or you could come. And she goes, well, do I have to stay if I don't like it? I said, no, that's fine. No indentured servitude here. You can, put you on a plane, you can go back to the US. And she was here. She came down sight unseen when we migrated. And she was here about 2 or 3 weeks and proclaimed at the dinner table that she thinks she's been an Australian all her life and didn't know it. And now we all are Australians. So we're dual citizens with the U.S. So I say I'm an Australerican.
I love that.
Or a larrikin, based on whatever you think. But it's cool. And this is home. This is home. Been here now 13 and a half years.
Yeah, nice.
Haven't found the accent. Couldn't find the place to get that installed when we got our citizenship, but that's all right.
Well, can you give another 13 years, Bob? It'll probably.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. My daughter picked it up right away at 20, and she's got a great ear. Every once in a while, though, she says an American thing with an Australian accent. People go, where are you from? So she does get caught out once in a while, but she enjoys being an Australian and having an Australian accent. And she, I can hardly remember what it's like hearing her speak like an American, actually.
Wow.
So, yeah.
You always been on the East Coast?
I'm sorry?
Have you always been on the East Coast?
So I lived in Canberra for 7 years, Adelaide for 2 on a program we worked on, and then moved up to the Sunshine Coast.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically, I've visited. I think I've ever been to every capital city. Been to Perth a number of times. Done a bit of traveling. Done a bit of camping. I love to camp. So,
Oh yeah, nice.
Getting the tent going and going out there and just exploring. It's just fantastic. It's just a fantastic place to do that. So I've been around the country a bit. There's still more to see, but I've been around a bit. It's just a fantastic place. I love it here. Absolutely love it here.
That's awesome. I think Tourism Australia should cut that little bit up. And
there we go. We'll leave it to them.
I love that. Sunny Coast is stunning. I'm a big fan of the Sunny Coast. A little bit more chilled out. It's getting a bit busier now in the last kind of 5%, obviously. But yeah, beautiful spot, mate. Let's dive in a little bit deeper about how you. Well, I guess the lessons that you've learned in your career, if that's okay.
Sure.
So you've met a lot of people, I'd imagine. If I ask you who your biggest influence was, do you have anyone that springs to mind?
I could give you the real typical my parents answer. And they were very, very different, my parents. So I kind of did, I like these things from column A and I like these things from column B between mom and dad. So I can't say it's one or the other of them. I had a couple of managers who were very supportive of the people that worked in their organizations. They rarely, if ever, took credit for what the people in their organizations did, yet they were very, very persistent supporters of the people in the organization, but weren't blind to when things didn't go well. I mean, they would be very, very direct communicators if they had an expectation that was different. And they engaged in a bit of intelligent disobedience. They would bend the rules for something that made sense. Mm-hmm. They would understand that individuals are just that, individuals, and would modify that standard set of things that you're supposed to do and or give and or supply, to all of your employees in such a way that it was actually more fair, going back to my statement earlier about it being equal for everybody, right?
Yeah. That's an interesting point. I had one of my first mentors. He said to me one day, "You don't even realize, Nathan, I'm actually your mentor." We got along like a house on fire. And funnily enough, years later, I realized that he was right. But he said to me, "You usually," and I'm curious as to if you kind of agree with this line of thinking. He said, usually most people fall into either being rule followers or I guess results driven.
Yeah. And it's interesting. When I was doing the research for the book, and I say it takes courage to engage in intelligent disobedience, and it does, especially if you're going to all out break a rule.
Yeah.
And I was talking about the risk associated with this. I was writing the chapter on risk. And it was very surprising to me because you'd find people that would stress about breaking the rules, even though they knew and were leery about not producing the outcome. And then you'd have other people that weren't at all stressed about breaking the rules because they're all about, I'm not going to sit here and follow the process if the outcome that the process was intended to produce isn't going to happen. That's just a non-issue. I'm going to do something else. So the risk for them is not producing the outcome. It's an interesting mindset. And one of the things, you're right. It's the characteristic of the person that comes into the role, but the leader has a very, very significant role to play in this as well. If the leader defines one's job as following the process to produce this outcome versus these are the outcomes I want you to produce, and here's a toolkit that includes processes that you could use to produce that outcome, that's the same, that could be the same job, two different ways to define it. And it's understanding, by the way, the nature of those rules and those processes. So I've seen this in banks where in financial institutions where, producing this, whatever this is, right? I know it's my phone, but producing this report or this thing is a mandatory regulated requirement. Now, in some cases, the process that you have to follow to produce this report, this item, is also mandated. Developing a new vaccine, shall we say. The process by which you're going to do that and test it is a very regulated thing, in addition to here's the output, here's the outcome, and how you have to document it. That's not always the case. Financial institutions are really good at this. They have regulations for producing this, but not necessarily the process. But when you get in and start to talk to people in the bank, we can't change that, we can't change that process. That's regulated. No, it isn't. It's just you've been doing it the same way since Moby Dick was a guppy. Yeah, you think that's, because you're so concerned about the accuracy of this, which I totally get. People make a presumption or behave as if the process to get to this is also mandated. And often it isn't. And I say, look, I was trying to be lighthearted about describing it. I say, you can use 2 PhDs or 87 possums. It doesn't matter as long as this outcome is what results in is accurate. Yeah. And so it's a mindset around the role, and it's a mindset around the rules that you have and the outcomes that you produce.
Okay. And so if, let's say, in your experience, someone new comes into the role and they want to go about changing, I guess one of the processes, as you put it, that has been there since maybe the birth of the business, even. Is it usually quite a hard? I guess do they find it difficult to change processes, or is it literally a case of
it depends on where you're talking about first, Nathan. I mean, if I have people that are, let's say, they're working in the public utility company and they're managing the electric power grid, that's not something that changes often.
Yeah.
And you don't want to dink around with it because you want to make sure that people have power and the hospital still has power and right? Vital services still have power, right? So you can't dink around with that. A change is something that they're going to take a very, very long time and do a lot of studies, and right? So they're going to be very deliberate. Someone in Google, how often does Google change the search engine? Multiple times a day to see what happens, right? Because they put a change in, they leave it in there for 5 minutes, and they'll get a couple 100,000 samples of what happens, right? Whatever the case may be. I mean, they can change that, and they can change it back. So that first thing is it's the first to consider. It's context. The second thing is what it means for the individual and their confidence level and their fear.
Yeah.
If something has been there for a long time, and there isn't, a process that hasn't been there for a long time, let us say, and if there isn't a perceived gold ring or aspirin, which is what I like to say, or Panadol, right? If I don't have pain that needs relief and I don't perceive that there's some real reward, I'm unlikely to change something, because candidly, we don't change well. Yeah. And when I tell people, and they say, I'm pretty comfortable with change, they say, do you wear a watch? A sport watch, smart watch, anything? Try putting it on the other wrist for a day. I've said people go, nah, I'm not even going to try that. Yeah. It's like, that's a trivial change. It's not anything that's going to have any bearing on whether you're going to get a successful evaluation and a raise at the end of the year of work. That is a lot more substantial than the wristwatch that you have and what wrist you put it on, right? We aren't good. We're particularly good at change. So, and if you have the new guy or gal that comes in and proposes a change, right?
Yeah.
Then there's, my first question is, all right, what homework, what are you trying to achieve? What's your perceived gold ring or Panadol or aspirin? And what are you trying to change, and what research have you done as to why that process is the way it is, right? And they may not have done that. And then it's good to take a look back and consider that. And that's not to say that we weren't going to change, because there's processes that are in place in all kinds of businesses for that one thing that was an oddity that occurred 3 years ago that no one wants to have repeated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Never happened again. Maybe the conditions aren't even there in place for it to continue to happen again, but by golly, we're going to still do that process, or we're going to produce those reports, or we're going to do this analysis to make sure it doesn't happen. It might not even be possible anymore, but no one's taken a look back to say, why are we doing this? Mm-hmm. So it could be a very, very legitimate question. And I think we need to be mindful of that. And the new person that doesn't have that background could actually be the breath of fresh air you need to take something and make it much more efficient.
It's funny you bring that up. There's so many examples that even I've been brought across of people outside of industries being brought in, and that idea of having fresh eyes, or even, whether it be processes or programs or whatever else, being a lot more universal, at least cross industry, than people probably realize or even took a moment to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the fresh eyes. When you have someone that's not making assumptions and is actually going to start asking questions, it's a fantastic outcome. If you are patient enough to allow that process to happen, it's a fantastic outcome.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's pretty much the core of the new age thinking of marketing these days, isn't it? The going to everything with no assumptions, literally split testing everything and letting the data, I guess, dictate your path forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As long as the data's taken in the right context and is collected in the right context. The person that observes a process and observes a whole bunch of people following a process is going to draw some conclusions, but inherently the behavior is going to change by the people that know they're being watched. Right? Mm-hmm. So you've got to understand that in making observations, you could completely unknowingly be affecting the outcome. So it's how you collect information. Do you have it in a number of different ways? Do you collect it in a number of different fashions? Do you analyze it, in different manner, with different potential, and you can come up with really, really good information in that case, right? But it's understanding you might have an effect on that outcome.
And then, of course, what are you actually looking to, what are you trying to find yourself? And because you'll look for that information, you'll find it.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Oh, what's, how to lie with statistics. You can, I have a degree in mathematics. It's not hard to do. You can skew graphs. You can do all sorts of things to help reinforce a conclusion if you have a foregone conclusion when you start to collect information. So really, it's being as objective as you possibly can. If you're really going to do, if you're really going to be on a quest for improvement or to make change that's productive, it's very important that you do that. Very important that you do that.
They've been a pretty a core part of the conversation tonight so far, Bob. But how important are systems and processes for every business?
Oh, look. If you run a small business, if every single engagement or customer that you treat, you have a different process or you have to create different things, you're going to be extraordinarily busy. Right? Now there are, what's the discussion? There are boutique businesses and then there's franchise businesses, right? Yeah. And that, the boutique business requires some very, very particularly skilled individual. It's not like Macca's, where you've got to, here's how you set up the restaurant, and here's the process, and here's what you do, and you're going to repeat it, and hopefully every burger you get at one is going to be the same that you get in another, whether you like that or not. I won't pass judgment on, but that's a franchise, right? You're going to do things the same way, very, very process bound. Where somebody that's running a boutique business is going to bring their own set of unique characteristics and styles and background and all to the table. So I think based on the nature of the business that you're running, processes are going to differ, and how much they need to be universal and strictly followed is going to be different. But even in a small boutique business, if every single time you have to recreate the wheel, I mean, I tell project managers all the time, plagiarism is a virtue. If you can do it legally, find the project that's kind of similar to yours. Do not write the entire project schedule from scratch. Don't write the whole risk plan from scratch. There's going to be common denominators within the business that you run. Start with something and then make modifications. Don't just copy it and paste it and go. That's not what I mean. But plagiarism is a virtue when you can do that. So there's always, in my mind, a degree of process, and sometimes very, very strict processes that you're going to want to follow, and they're very beneficial. But it does depend on the nature of the business and what you're trying to accomplish.
Let's touch on your previous businesses there.
Sure.
Video just stopped. So you've had 4. I guess what I'm curious about, Bobby, is did you yourself see, very similar process across the 4 businesses?
Sure.
How much did they differ?
Not very much at all. And the nature of the businesses that I started didn't differ at all, but it's understanding when they have to differ. So if I start a project management training consulting business in the US, and then I decide to come to Australia and I start one here, first of all, the tax laws are different.
Yeah.
And it's understanding I can't use the same set of parameters to collect the same information and expect that's going to be fine with the Australian government versus the US government. And then you add the whole factor of living in one country and paying tax in another, and the whole thing gets a little messy. So but the real core back office processes that you have, how you're going to invoice people, how you're going to collect information, how your pricing models are going to be, what your suite of offerings are, and how you document them in the businesses that I've run are all very, very similar. I've also found marketing and selling the business to be something that is a reflection of my strengths and who I am. If I decide to be a marketer and behave like a marketer instead of behave like Bob McGannon, I'm going to fail miserably. I'm going to behave like Bob McGannon. And by the way, in learning and about running my own businesses, that was a major discovery, because I was a horrible failure trying to be the marketeers that I saw in my career prior to this in IBM. That's not who I am. Probably bits of it. I shouldn't say it's like yes and no, but I'm going to be myself. I'm going to use the tools that I have to promote the business, which is my ability to speak. I do keynotes, I run workshops, show people what it is that you're capable of doing. That was the best way to market the business, versus design a lot of sales pitches and brochures and that sort of thing. That worked for me because it was a reflection of me. There are other people that are fantastic at putting together the really, the brochure that's absolutely going to capture someone's attention. Well, good on them. That's what they should do. That isn't me. Yeah. So it's understanding that, for instance, right? So those are common denominators. The products that we sell and how we sell them and how you deliver them, even in the same business of project management, training, and consulting, how you do that in the US and how you do that in Australia, very different. Yeah, very different. The cultural difference is substantial. And I was just talking to someone the day before yesterday. I said, really, the cultural difference is substantial? I said, look at what the US has done and the behavior of the average US citizen with COVID versus what we did here in Australia. I think there's a little difference. Yeah.
Worlds apart.
Yeah, worlds apart. Worlds apart. So it's understanding that. Now, I have been told, and I think this is true, there's an advantage to having an American accent because I can be a little more boisterous than maybe the average Australian could, because he's just American. It's okay. Right? Just like what an Australian, I mean, teasing each other, taking the Mickey out of each other. All right. To use it's like the national sport. here in Australia to me. I think it's fantastic, but you can't do that in the US.
Really?
I couldn't go back to the US and do that. Oh no, not with people I don't know. Only with a smaller set of people that you know. Everybody would look at you a little sideways and wonder what you're doing. Unless you do it with an Australian accent. They're like, oh, it doesn't matter. He's Australian. Right?
Gotcha.
So there's that, you know, that difference that's understood to at least some level. I mean, not a deep level, but it doesn't matter. You can behave, you know, within a set of parameters with the tools that you have. But yeah, the culture is very, very different about how you do that.
It's so interesting. I haven't been to America yet. It is on the to-do list. Not anytime soon, obviously, unfortunately. But very, very intrigued by the. I always saw Australia as. I don't have genuine context, but I always used to flippantly say that we're kind of 15 to 20 years behind America as far as culture, and we just kind of follow Americans' footsteps. But I could be wildly wrong.
You know, in some respects, maybe. The U.S. will try more things and go like this more often, or we'll go like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they go to extremes. Hasn't been anything extremes in the political view and what's happening in the U.S., has there? Yeah. I just don't think that had happened here. I think people would go, "Wow, that's just way too far out for me," you know.
Yeah.
You know, but that there's, you know, I tease about that. And I joke about that, and it's only because of the concern that I feel underneath it, in that what is happening in that space, and whether it's, you know, you're a supporter of the Democratic ideals or the Republican ideals, I think is irrelevant to what I'm about to say. What I've seen is the ability to engage in reasonable discourse about solving a problem is becoming really hard to find, and that's what distresses me more than anything else. Whether it's something swings largely to the Republican side of the House or the Democratic side of the House, I think the pendulum swinging over time is probably healthy. But not being able to have good conversation about discourse is not intelligent disobedience to me. There's something really wrong when that starts to happen.
It's such a shame. You know, you know yourself, mate, we're starting to see the same thing in Australian politics, obviously not to the extremities of the US. Hopefully that won't happen. But, you know, the idea that even in this country, Liberal versus Labor, like, they've all got their own, I guess, internal ideas and values. And that's how they obviously rule the country. But the country changes. Right. And so the idea of what's socially acceptable and what we really need, that changes over time. And sometimes Labor's going to do their thing and it's going to work and it's going to be right. And then the country will evolve. And then the Liberal Party's going to do their thing and that's going to be right. And then we'll shift. And then there'll be somewhere in the middle. But
Absolutely.
there doesn't seem to be any sort of, you know, understanding of this in any case.
Yeah. It becomes, our thinking is becoming entrenched and is intended to represent some form of compliance to a set of standards versus or rules or expectations, party related expectations versus taking a look at the problem at hand. Now, again, that I don't think that's happening to the same degree here. And again, I think COVID is a very, very good example of that and how it started off with a lot of harmony. Now, time caught up to it, right? And then we have the different premiers doing different things and throwing spears at each other and that sort of thing. But in the end, yeah, we had a bit of protests here, but we're not having what's happening in the U.S. And what's happening in the U.S., by the way, the media has... the media is not going to report on the 5 people that are sitting peacefully with candles.
Yeah.
They're going to report on the more exaggerated, more, outstanding, the more outrageous, the more demonstrative sort of things where people are protesting and there's battles and there's fights and or whatever the case may be, and then sadly looting, and it's very difficult for the camera and a reporter, not to mention the police departments, to know the difference between a protester and a rioter. The rioter being there to take advantage for their own purposes, not
Yeah.
particularly high integrity purposes. And I think they're pretty gifted at turning from a rioter into looking into a protester when the time comes. And so you end up treating the entire set of protesters as if there's a potential they could be rioters, because there's a subset of them that could be. So I feel, while there's some really horrific things surfacing about what police departments are going through right now, and how people are being treated at times, I absolutely have a lot of respect for those people in that role that are doing the right thing. They have an extraordinarily challenging job in a situation like that. But most of America is not like that. Most of the people that you would meet are not like that. I mean, I don't go to the US and worry about getting shot.
Yeah.
And I don't know a lot of people who carry firearms. I know some people do. That's not my community. I'm not, and I know folks that have gone to the US recently and talked about how friendly everybody was and how much they absolutely loved it. It is an amazing place with a ton going on, and is an amazing place to visit. And when we're traveling regularly, which we haven't been doing, and when we do again, it's very, very likely that I'll be back in the U.S. 2-3 times a year for periods of time, for family reasons and for business reasons, and for being in that vibe. But this is home. This is home for me.
One thing I do love, I spent a few years in the UK. I only got back January this year, actually, which was well timed. That's another story. But it's one thing Australia doesn't have yet is genuine history. So that's definitely one thing that intrigued me about Europe, and I imagine the same thing in America.
Yeah, although America's older than Australia, but there's nothing like walking in the UK in London into Westminster Abbey, and you're in a building that was built in whatever it was, 1085, whatever they started the construction, right? 1100. I mean, whatever. It's just an absolutely amazing thing to experience. So I get it. Yeah, I get it. It's very special to be in that sort of environment with the extent of history that's there. And you're right. We don't have that yet. We don't have that yet. And I think we're still unraveling in some respects what that is, actually.
Yeah.
And really processing what that is, and some of the dialogue that's going on around that, I think, is very healthy to understand that history. Just as it's healthy, by the way, to understand a very similar circumstance of what happened with Native Americans in the U.S. and Canada, and how that whole process took place. And that's just one aspect. That's just one aspect of understanding history and what it is that has constituted and brought us to where we are today.
Well, why do you think people struggle, I guess, having a conversation at polar opposite ends of the subject? I see it day in, day out. The sensitivity of a subject obviously comes into play, but and there's a lot of emotion involved. Obviously, that can't be discounted, but I can only speak for, well, really Queensland, to be fair, maybe a little bit of Victoria, but I feel that we definitely, Australians, struggle to have these overly sensitive conversations, and we struggle to really hear the other person and see their perspective. I guess I hope that changes, but it's tough.
It is. And someone has said to me once that WAR is an acronym. It means we are right.
Yeah, I like that.
And when you look at something as a binary sort of situation, yes, no, on, off, good, bad, I think that's where the breakdown starts. And it's understanding that there are some different perspectives to this, and there are going to be different observations, from different people. I mean, how often, do you see experiments where, you have 4 or 5 witnesses that have different backgrounds. They watch, they all see the same thing. And what they report happened is different because of looking at it through different filters.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say anything. Everybody may be telling an absolute genuine story that is meaningful to them and truthful to them based on what it is they saw and what it is they processed. And as soon as we forget that's our nature as human beings, and that there could be other possibilities, you're going to have less than productive conversations. One of the things that I try to talk about as a leader is understanding the concept of your truth and the truth. So you and I, Nathan, may be working on, let's talk about a project, because I love to talk about projects, right? And I go, I think this project's going to be easy, really low risk. I think this is going to happen. And you might look at me and your eyes might just bug out of your head. So I'm like, God, I've worked on 3 projects like this, and there was all kinds of issues. Your truth, based on your background, is different than mine. Yeah. That doesn't mean mine's right, doesn't mean yours right. Yours is right. The best thing we can do is have a conversation that constitutes an invitation to put our truths on the table, take a real objective look at all of them, and that's the best place to determine the truth. And then the best way to go forward, being mindful of the things that you've experienced, and maybe understanding some of the things that I've experienced that might have prevented some of that, or things that I just got lucky and didn't see, right? So you take a look at that pile of truth, and you're going to get a better outcome. And I think whether it's running a project, leading a group, or discussing a social issue or history, as soon as you perceive that your truth is the truth, I think you eliminate a lot of possibilities and a lot of constructive options when you do that.
I think it's very easy and very common to forget that we're really all flawed in many different ways.
And we all have strengths also, by the way. I mean, I don't want to focus just on the negative of that. We all have strengths. And in my example, my particular strengths might have worked where yours did not. And the next time you and I sit and decide to work on a project together, the exact opposite thing might happen because of your strengths have overcome some concerns and mine didn't. Mm-hmm. So again, it's the understanding that the truth is best compiled by the observations and background and capabilities of people involved, which brings me all the way back to one of the first things that we talked about. If you take fear out of the system and you encourage the concept of, the truth is a compilation, and let's, and emphasize, let's not mistake your truth or my truth as the truth. Let's, combine that and the perspectives that brings to the table, and therefore the possibilities that brings to the table. I think we're going to be much better leaders and have much better and healthier organizations and healthier societies if we can have those conversations.
Mm-hmm. As you said, it's healthy, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. People come to me, because I do a lot of coaching with folks on intelligent disobedience, on leadership and that sort of thing. And sometimes I'll have people say to me, I need to influence them to make this decision. And I go, why do they think differently? Well, because they said, da, 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 da. No, that's what they think differently. Why do they think differently? Yeah. Until you understand that that's what you're trying to overcome, you're not going to influence somebody. And how do you do that? Put your truth on the table and invite them to put their truth on the table. Because really, once you know that, the outcome or the process or the expectation or the suggestion that you might have might change.
Yep. More context.
Exactly.
Bob, you've brought up tools quite a few times tonight. Have you got a tool or even a couple of tools that you use on the daily, weekly, monthly, you couldn't live without?
Sure. There's a book called Fierce Conversations that's one of my favorites, by Susan Scott. In it, she has got an issue clarity worksheet. She says, if you're going to engage in a discussion when you feel you have to change someone's mind or you're dealing with a problem or whatever,
Yeah.
It's a fantastic book to help you form really meaningful conversations. And fierce doesn't mean, violent or overly direct. But it does mean very purposeful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And intentional, and not sugarcoating things. But she has this issue clarity worksheet, and it's a series of questions that you ask yourself. The most important conversations are the ones you have with yourself, actually, I think. And this helps you formulate your own set of thoughts and opinions and views, so you can participate in this my truth is not the truth conversation, and set you up to be able to extend an invitation to someone to have a conversation about an issue or a problem or an expectation, or whatever the case may be. So I think that's the first thing that comes to mind. The second thing that comes to mind is rather self-serving. Is I've always had kind of a risk checklist in my head for how to go through and decide what I'm going to put on my to-do list for today.
Yeah.
And I've included a risk checklist and sort of a scorecard in my Intelligent Disobedience book, where I've tried to make it more objective. Didn't like doing that particularly, by the way. And in the book I say, I've done this, and if you really need the numbers, then use the numbers. But this is intended to be a thought experiment for you to determine, where you are on a risk model. So I've followed that for quite some time, and I've modified that over a number of years by adding some things or taking out some things, whatever the case may be, as my leadership journey has extended. And to a very, very great degree, when I'm in a position where I want to engage in intelligent disobedience, or I'm working with people and I want to encourage them to engage in intelligent disobedience, that model that I alluded to, that has 4 different levels of intelligent disobedience and the characteristics for this, I use that pretty extensively, actually, as well. So those are the 3 that I use more than anything else.
I like that. Did you want to just quickly run through the 4 different levels?
Sure. And the first of the levels is going to be very restricted and very well defined. So that's, you're not going to break rules, by the way. You're only going to be able to bend them.
Yeah.
Okay. And here are the ones that we expect that we're going to give you the latitude for, and here's the extent of it. So I think I used the example with you about, you can go over budget on doing this, but no more than 5%. But you don't have to call me until you have something, and get authority until it's over 5% or 10%, whatever makes sense for your context. The second level of intelligent disobedience is normally you can break some rules and bend others. And again, they're normally restricted to a given area of the business or a given set of processes, right? So you're extending this to, you can follow an entirely different process with this. Okay. The third level of intelligent disobedience is that you can bend and break rules. You expand the degree to which you can do that, and the set of rules that you can influence or have influence over, and you normally extend the degree of impact on the business, financially, time, whatever standards, protocols, policies you would want to engage in. So that's the third level. The fourth level is the same level of intelligent disobedience you would do yourself. This is your second in command. This is I'm gone, you're sitting in the chair. You've got the same latitude of intelligent disobedience that I give myself.
Wow.
And so that's not something you're going to give to multiple people, typically. If someone has the luxury of having 3 or 4 people that they can pick to sit in their office when they go on holiday and take over their leadership role, wow, that would be fabulous. I've never had that experience, right? There's certainly, I like it when I have 1. It's an amazing luxury when you have 2, right? So mostly that level of intelligent disobedience is going to be reserved for a single individual. And maybe not at all. That's always possible, that you don't have someone at that degree, and that you're going to have a level 3 intelligent disobedience sort of person. It's going to have a lot of latitude, but not necessarily the whole latitude you'd give yourself.
That'd be true freedom, wouldn't it? You grab 2 or 3 people at level 4.
Tell me about it. That would be quite the luxury. That would be quite the luxury. Yeah. Like I said, I've had an instance where I had 2, and I didn't have that for long because they get promoted into someplace else, which is actually the right thing. I think the essence of intelligent disobedience and the intent of intelligent disobedience is to grow people. It's to grow the outcomes that you can create, but therefore that also grows people. And when I was in IBM, I had the title of Delivery Project Executive. And a very good number of people that reported to me at some point in time became delivery project executives. It was an unusually high number compared to my peers, and I think that's the thing that I'm most proud of, is that I was able to support people through their growth. And I do it for selfish reasons. I wanted to be able to go on holiday and not worry about who was sitting in my chair, right? I really did. But some people step to the plate, and I think that makes me extraordinarily proud, and I hope it would make other leaders proud to say that they've spawned leaders. So the good leader that's got 3 or 4 people that could have a level 4 of intelligent disobedience and step in. I said, well, why are you keeping them in your organization? There's other places in the business that they probably could go and should go to fulfill the capabilities that they have and have you support their own growth. So as much as I say it's a luxury, if it really was happening, I'd probably have a question in my mind and say, well, what aren't you doing?
It's definitely something to grand to aspire to. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
With that's an interesting idea there, Bob. Is there an element of I guess in your own experience in developing leaders, was there any sort of I guess template or process? Generally speaking, of course, you got different personalities, but was there some sort of system or process that you adhere to develop leadership?
Outside of the level of intelligent disobedience and having that model and a completely different skill set, right? Intelligent disobedience and engaging someone in intelligent disobedience doesn't mean they're a good draftsman or a better draftsman or the best draftsman. It has nothing to do with that, right? It's a combination of emotional intelligence and business acumen, being able to assess short and long-term risks. How do you manage your relationships, and how well do you get to know your clients? Because candidly, if you engage in an act with intelligent disobedience with one client and give them a little extra something, that's going to be something that client is going to expect and pound you on the head and shoulders for from now until forever. Others will recognize that as you're doing them a favor and respect that. So it's that sort of knowledge, it's that sort of understanding of how people work and how clients and are going to behave and how peers are going to behave. So it isn't anything that you teach in Harvard Business School even, right? So there is sort of a kind of a pathway that's sort of defined by the 4 levels of intelligent disobedience. So but other than that, I really don't have a big model. It's understanding what someone's strengths are, and understanding, I want to make you better. I want to make you better at the things that you're weak in. Well, that works if it's because they don't have knowledge.
Yep.
Add the knowledge, give them some more tools, give them the time to learn, they get better. That's fine. In other cases, you can work really, really hard with me, and I am not going to enjoy financial analysis. Thank you very much. Right? I mean, as I say, it's like trying to make a duck bark. It's just not going to happen. Right? So it's understanding that that's the person that you're dealing with, and therefore there are things that they're going to be able to do, and then you need to work with them again, like one of the points I talked about earlier, work with them to understand those things that they're not particularly good at, or they don't think are particularly fun. Find someone to do that for you and be comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's really based on the individual, their strengths, their disposition, and their ambition. What do they want? What do they want? And what sacrifices are they willing to make to do that, and not make to do that? I mean, there are people that can be very, very effective leaders, and they're family people, and they're going to work so many hours a week, and they're going to reserve that time for their family. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be the best leader that you have. They might be, but it's understanding the things that they're willing to do and supporting that balance, like the 4 things I talked about, mission, people, capability, and self. How good are they at understanding that balance and being able to manage it for themselves and then for the team that they work with?
So that idea of self-awareness coming through yet again, Bob, it's huge.
It is.
Do you interesting little tangent there. I just had a thought hit myself. Have you seen any differences, or does it come into play at all, introverts versus extroverts in leadership positions?
There's a fantastic book called Quiet, I think it's called. I'll have to look it up. It's basically being an introvert in an extroverted world. And so, and the power of introverts in an extroverted world. I think a leader has to be very mindful of the positions that they put people in, and to not lose strength and capability because you need the answer right this moment, when you really don't need the answer right this moment. I mean, I took over an organization that had a team of absolutely strong, very capable, very extroverted people. And I am extroverted as well. I say I only open my mouth to change feet sometimes, because whatever happens in my head comes out of my mouth, right? And I have to be mindful of that. I'm also mindful of, I'm happy to, leap before I look. I'll follow my intuition. I'll draw conclusions quickly. Has that served me well? Yes. Does it always serve me well? Not so much. Has its limitations, right? And I purposefully brought someone with a different background onto the team, and who was an introvert. And we would have meetings at 3, unless it was something that we need to decide. We'd have meetings at 3:00 in the afternoon for an hour, maybe longer if we needed to. We would reconvene at 8:15 the next morning. To allow, his name was Mike, to allow Mike his 15 minutes. And normally he would have thought about it, written this amazingly eloquent email that we would all have in front of us at 8:15 the next morning. We'd go, dang, Mike, that's fantastic. You're right. I hadn't thought of that. Or, oh, I'm glad you're happy with that, or whatever the case may be. Maybe we'd ask some clarification on things, and then we'd make the decision. It was very good to have that counterbalance for the team, but you sometimes have to accommodate it, right?
What do you mean by that?
You put an introvert in a situation where you expect them to respond immediately, or you think because they didn't say anything that they don't have an opinion. You are losing the capability and the strength of that person in performing whatever it is that goes on in their head, and to analyze the situation, to come up with their point of view. You are going to have times where you leap before you look, and there might surface some things and say, well, hang on, let's consider this, that, and the other thing. And they're spot on. But we've got, where the extroverts get themselves all hyped up about it. Now, I'm categorizing, in this example, I'm categorizing extroverts as being the folks that leap before they look. That's not necessarily always the case with extroverts. So I want to make that point clear for anybody that's listening, right? But I'm talking about those opposite characteristics. So when you're talking about extrovert and introvert, it's a matter of understanding the strength and balance that can give you when you have those different characteristics. And again, sometimes you have to accommodate them to really get the strength and treasures and gifts that you can take from them.
So it comes back to, I want to assume, does it come back to removing the fear, as
Absolutely.
you touched on earlier?
Absolutely. And it's funny. We talk about diversity, and now I'm glad we're talking about diversity, inclusion, and acceptance. I mean, having that diverse individual, be they race or gender or religion or background or orientation or blah 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 blah, right? Whatever those options are, it's a matter of including them and then accepting their ideas and their perceptions and their points of view. And that's what we're talking about here. There's strength in that. It's often harder because you've got more to sort through, but there's strength in that. And introversion and extroversion is a big piece of that. But again, you have to understand that to take advantage of those strengths, you may have to change the model. You may have to change your own habits about what you think, what is the right thing, the timing for things, how you judge them, what you may think you're comfortable with and are not comfortable with. You have to be open to that. And by the way, self-aware. You mentioned that earlier. It's one of the things that I've been mentioning a lot, and this is another instance of self-awareness too. Understanding whether is that something that is truly wrong, is truly uncomfortable, or is it different or coming from a perspective you don't understand.
It's funny the way you put it. Then I'm just scratching the surface of being the observer of my own actions and being presented with some timely, not so nice truths and realizing that I'm not as perfect as I once thought I was, but which is an interesting part of my own journey. But I looked at that book. You were bang on, mate. Quiet by Susan Cain.
Yes.
So go check that one out, ladies and gents.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Bob, what's I want to touch on maybe the biggest lesson that you've learned in your career so far, and then once we go through that, we'll go to the other side of the coin, mate. We'll go on perhaps your biggest win. But what do you feel is the biggest lesson you've learned so far in your career?
Sometimes you need to engage in intelligent disobedience. And that includes saying no to maintain what's right and what you think constitutes integrity. I tell a story in the book about being uncomfortable about an assignment that I was given because it really belonged in a different department versus mine. And my manager was very enthusiastic about me doing this because it wasn't getting done and it needed to get done.
Yeah.
But I'd say, well, what interference, what clearance, what have you done to allow me to do this from here versus this other area of the business? And was told, no, don't worry about that. I'll take care of that. Well, I don't know whether he never took care of it. He thought he had took care of it, or he tried to take care of it and failed. But not only did we have issues with achieving the business outcomes, personal relationships, business, professional, and personal relationships were permanently broken, severed, and trust lost because of me trying to do the job that I was told to do instead of saying no, or instead of being more persistent to say, this is not right. We need to do something different. And in my heart of hearts, I knew that was the case very early on. But I took the being the good soldier is try to keep doing this because I've been asked, where being the good soldier really would have been, we're wasting time and money here. Yeah. And we're creating angst, and we're not going to create outcomes as a result. So it's following that knowledge and saying no or questioning something. Um, in short, I'd say sort of a generic term. It's being okay with engaging in intelligent disobedience to protect your own integrity.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do that, and I also talk about regrets and remorse. Regrets are something where you wanted it to go differently, so you're sorry about the action you took or the thing you said or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
That has a tendency to not last long. That's my vocabulary, by the way. Remorse, you carry that around like baggage. It doesn't go away. It's because of an action you took that was wrong, or an action that you know you took that you didn't take.
Yeah.
I'm not into remorse. I would rather have regrets now and then than risk remorse by doing nothing or engaging in something I think was wrong and not doing anything about it. So that's the biggest lesson. Do not toy with remorse.
I really like that. It's quite a tough thing to do for a lot of people, though, isn't it? The idea of almost managing your managing your managers, or at least
it is. It is. And by the way, whether it's when I share what I just said to share to you about remorse, and I actually write this in the book, and whenever I talk about intelligent disobedience in a more extensive time frame, and this is good, and thank you for the time to do this. So I want to share. I don't pass judgment on whether someone could, would, or should engage in an act of intelligent disobedience, because I don't know their circumstance, right? So if you have an individual that is got a lot of money in the bank, a lot of freedom, they're an excellent networker, they know they've got 4 or 5 other job possibilities, they might drumming up the courage to engage in an act of intelligent disobedience and breaking the rules because they think it's the right thing to do, and they are truly doing that with positive intent, they're probably not going to think too much about it. Somebody else who has a very, very judgmental manager, has a wife that's sick and 2 kids with special needs and not a lot of money in the bank, if they look at me and say, I can't take that risk right now, and yes, this may come back to haunt me in 8 months' time when someone finds out that this outcome didn't happen or whatever, I'm going to have to deal with it then. I'm not going to pass judgment on that. That person is in a way different situation, and they're going to assess risk differently. That's fine. My objective in talking about intelligent disobedience is to put the possibility of thinking differently in front of them. That's all I really strive for, because walking away and saying, yes, people are going to engage in acts of intelligent disobedience may or may not be the right thing based on who they are and where they are and the context of where they're working. It's just the having that thought process, considering other possibilities. And the way I like to state it is I want to have people examine their own relationship with the rules.
Yeah. Well, it's giving people options, isn't it?
I hope so. That's my intent. It's certainly my intent. And I think people have more options than they often think they do. There's a bit of learned helplessness that can occur in an organization, and particularly when it's one that has done something repetitively the same way for a long time, or a regulated industry where people have this perception, going back to my analogy here, right, that the process is regulated and not just the outcome or the output.
So let's flip it, Bob. That's a great lesson. Obviously, what do you have marked down as perhaps your biggest win so far?
That I had a positive impact on people's lives. And sometimes you don't even know that that's the case. I had someone that I hadn't seen in 10 years. that I ran into. And they said, I was just thinking about you because somebody said something to my son, and I remember you said this to me once. And remember the conversation? Wow, I don't know where that came from, right? It's focusing on the leader being a person that could give opportunities to others. And if you genuinely have done that without selfish intent, or at least without primarily selfish intent, right? I mean, the people that are working for you do well and create better things and get better outcomes. It doesn't, you usually don't look too bad. So I don't mind getting some kudos associated with that, but it's not primarily for selfishness. It's a matter of focusing on, mission, people, capability, and self. It's, I think the way to describe it also, another way to describe it is holding people capable. I can hold you accountable, or I can think I can hold you accountable, Nathan, but unless you promise to yourself that you're going to do something, I can give you reward offers, I can give you penalty threats, whatever the case may be. But if you're like, this sucks, I'm just not going to do it, you'll just take whatever it is that happens and you're not going to do it. I can't hold you accountable. Only you can hold you accountable. What I can hold you is capable. I can see what tools do you have? What information do you have? What are positive things that are going to help you accomplish this task or create these outcomes, and make sure those are in place. What is it that might be an inhibitor, and get that out of your way to the greatest degree I possibly can. I'm going to hold you capable, and then hopefully create an environment where you want to hold yourself accountable to get those outcomes generated.
That idea of accountability is just starting to creep into conversations. I think, at a grassroots level almost. The conversation of do people today have very much a lack of accountability as a result of a number of things. Is there any merit in that?
Could be, sure. I think to the greatest degree to which we focus on the business mission and not on the people that they have to accomplish it, the people that you need to do things to accomplish it, the less dedication to getting things done is going to happen. Or if you put someone in a position where you're asking a duck to bark, they're going to get frustrated trying, and it probably won't take very long. If you treat people unfairly, if you treat people like they're not individuals, if you treat people without a degree of emotional intelligence, fear will generate some outcome for a period of time, and then it won't. It's a very, very weak way to lead. And it's very temporary in its effectiveness. I don't know if there's I don't know if I completely answered your question.
I think you did, mate. It's just an interesting idea, and I think it's something that's I think it's evolving right in front of our eyes. That's very tricky balance of self-awareness and accountability, along with empathy and understanding. I think they're just trying to. I say they. I think we, at least, society is just learning how to where the right balance is. All those ingredients.
I think the leader that focuses on creating an environment for themselves and wanting to have the people that report to them accommodate that, you're only going to have success for the people that are very, very much like you, which is not necessarily always the best thing, because you're not going to get different ideas and different perspectives and that sort of thing to bring to the table. So it's the leader that understands you want to create the environment that best supports the individuals that you want and need to do the work. and looking at it from that perspective, and then they'll hold themselves accountable because they'll want to be there. It's a meaningful thing to them, and you go forward from there, right? So creating an accountability environment that is shaped in the leader's objectives, I think is a falsehood that a lot of people try to do, a lot of leaders try to do. Mm-hmm. And I think it's one of these things, the harder you try, the worse it's going to be. Right? Create an environment that is very good for the folks that you need to do work with and for you, and the accountability will follow. Again, there's going to be exceptions in most cases. In most cases, the accountability will follow. There'll be exceptions now and then, but I don't think generally, a person wants to not be productive and not feel as if they're making a contribution.
Yeah.
While there are some, I don't think that's the general rule.
Yeah, it's not common.
No, I don't think it's common.
Bob, have you got any outside of your fantastic book, obviously, mate? Have you got any favorite books that
well, I mentioned Fierce Conversations.
Yeah.
That's the only time I reached out ever that I have reached out to an author after I've written a book. Only once have I ever done that, and it really is a fantastic book. I've become quite a fan of the leadership circle assessment process, and there's a book called Mastering Leadership that is associated with that. And the leadership circle assessment process is a very detailed 360-degree assessment. You assess yourself, your boss assesses you, and then some of your peers, and people that report to you. It is an extraordinarily fantastic tool to look at yourself and have others share what your leadership traits are. And it really divides into how much you're task oriented, how much you're principle oriented, how much you're reactive, and how much you're creative. And it is a real excellent assessment of determining where you are and giving you a tool to help you determine where you want to be as a leader and how you want to be perceived as a leader. I think it's a very excellent instrument, and Mastering Leadership is a book that goes with it. So it's called the Leadership Circle 360-degree assessment tool.
Wow, that's. I think some people would find that confronting. Other people, you'd get a lot of benefit from that exercise. That's for sure.
And the answer is to that, yes. It is both confronting, and you get a lot of really valuable information to help. It's cool. It's a very, very good tool. And I have both taken that assessment, had that done an analysis, and I've also talked to others and have been privy to their outcome. And the nature, as in a coach sort of environment, and the nature of the conversation and the specificity of the conversations that you can have as a result of that are pretty substantial.
Bob, when you reached out to Susan Scott who wrote Fierce Conversations, how did that play out, mate? Did she hit you back?
Absolutely. Almost immediately. I mean, it was like within a day.
Wow.
Yeah, it was within a day. It was really cool. And she's since retired, but she runs a business associated with, it's called Fierce Inc.
Yeah.
It's out of the west coast of the U.S. In Washington, near the Seattle area, and they do a lot of workshops and that sort of thing. And it's a good group. It's a good group, and it's a really good set of principles. But yeah, she actually, out of kindness and a great deal of generosity, which shows the kind of person she is, sent me her book proposal for Fierce Conversations as a means of helping me put together a book proposal for intelligent disobedience.
That's huge.
Yes, it is. It was. I am forever grateful for that.
That's unreal. I love hearing stories like that. It's
Yeah. And I try to do the same thing. If there's something that I can do, I've benefited from a lot of people like Susan. I benefited from university professors that went above and beyond when they saw something that I was doing that I could do better or I could do differently, or in one specific case, someone that took me under his wing and used to give me things to do that I didn't think I could do, and then supported me to show me that I could. So it's some very instrumental people in my life, and it's time to pay it forward. So I try to do the same thing.
That's unreal, mate. That's awesome. Bob, I've got a couple more questions, but is there anything that we've missed so far tonight that you'd love to shine a light on?
I think I would just want to emphasize that compassion is not weakness. It's not saying, "Oh, you poor person," right? It's and patting them on the back, or at least it's more than that, right? Maybe that's what they need a little bit of, and it's okay to give that. And it's the concept of having compassion, and it's very important to say having compassion for your business or organizational mission is right up there with having self-compassion and having compassion for, the capabilities of the team and the capabilities of your people and the people themselves. And purposefully thinking about what that balance needs to look like and where your balance might not be quite right is very important. And when I talk to leaders about that, I know when there's an imbalance when they start to say, "But," that's it. That's the one word that triggers me.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's not imbalanced. There's a reason for this. Well, if you really think about those four things, if you're paying too much attention to one or you're putting emphasis on one, the others are going to weaken eventually, if not quickly. Right? But the mission is there. It's not a matter of, yes, we may be in business to make a profit. Okay, let's that's the truth. And that's okay. But we have to take care of people, as leaders of humans, to do that. We have to understand what the capabilities are and how the capabilities need to change as the world changes around us. And it's changing faster and faster. And then understanding it is very, very difficult and will be seen as transparent if you're trying to care for others, if you don't care for yourself as a leader. And while I list that last, it's maybe the most important one. And it shows if you are not taking care of yourself, let's go back to the analogy of the weather. The weather is not going to be fair and sunny all that often when you're in the office if you're not taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
And encouraging the people that work with you to care for themselves as well. Because, by the way, they bring, unless, it's you and only you, you have an organization and you have people that report to you and have people report to them as you start to manage and be leader of a larger environment. There's your weather, but there's their weather too, that they're going to bring to their teams. So you need to care for that and care about that. So I think that's just, I just want to revisit that a bit and ask, listeners, anybody that's looking at their leadership, is to think of what kind of weather are they bringing to the organization? And if I was to challenge them to say, the storm clouds are because, which one of those four things are being missed? Right? And by the way, it could even be mission. I'd be, I'll never be mission because no, it could be mission. If you have people coming to work thinking that we're not making money, this is taking too much money. When's this business going to go belly up? And when am I going to have to look for work? Or maybe I'm looking for work now because I'm afraid. That's not good weather either.
Yeah.
So that is a significant part of the mix. But looking at those four things, and when you have things that are out of balance in that, there's going to be weather. There's going to be weather. And, breeze now and then is okay. Big change is going to create a little bit of bad weather and stormy weather. But, all right, bring umbrellas. People, talk out, share, understand what's happening, understand that having somebody wear their watch on their other wrist or whatever it is you're asking them to do is not easy. Okay, it's going to be stormy. That person I talked about that has that meeting on Monday that says, what are we going to do on Wednesday because these deadlines are looming? There's going to be pressure on people. Okay, bring umbrellas. What's that mean? I have no idea. It depends on your organization and what it is that you're doing, right? But it's probably consideration for people and maybe some other business things that you might be able to put in place from a capability standpoint, or even other things around your mission that you can do to improve the weather forecast, or at least give people assurance that the storm won't last long.
Love that. One thing that's really rung true throughout everything you've said tonight, Bob, to be fair, is how much, I guess, practical strategy or ideas that you can implement immediately that you've put in this book. So anyone and everyone, I think you should go out and grab that, because it's one thing to read a lot of ideas in a book, but I'm a big fan of having that practical implementation, or something you can take from any sort of media, let alone a book. And this is a little bit of a tangent, Bob, to be fair, mate, but I've always found it intriguing how I've had conversations with people before, and they've brought up the idea of, I read this book and there was really only one thing I took from it. I said, okay, isn't that a win? Mm-hmm. You've spent $40 at most. Like, I would pay, tens of thousands. If that one little nugget, if you are able to execute on that, then, the value that brings you really likely is exponential. Mm-hmm. Mate, I've got a couple more questions before I let you go. I do appreciate your time.
No worries.
This is one of my favorite questions, Bob, and I need to find out where I got it from. I'm not 100%. It might be Tim Ferriss, it might not, but it goes a little something like this. What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew before starting your business?
It's okay to ask for help. I was absolutely shocked in a very positive way at how enthusiastic people were when you are engaged in a business that they think has merit and they think that you do know how to do it. How willing they are to help. We are trained, and this is true in the US and it's true here to Australia, in Australia as well. We are trained to be independent to a fault. Mm-hmm. It's and it's funny. I talk to people about this once in a while, and I'll say, when people ask you for help, do you feel like they're imposing on you or whatever? And more often it's like, no, I'm glad to help. Well, how often do you ask for help? Not often. It's like, so your life would be easier, and you're giving someone else an opportunity to feel very, very good because they'd enjoy helping you, yet we don't do it. It's odd, isn't it? It's really kind of odd. Ask for help. Ask for help. It's okay. It's just absolutely okay. Ask for opinions. Ask for someone to give you their perspective on something. Ask for, hey, do you know anybody that might, or go into LinkedIn with someone you know and say, hey, that's a contact of yours. I think that'd be great if could you introduce me to them? People are happy to help. Yeah. More often than not, if you have integrity and you're doing something that makes sense to the people that care about you, they'll bend over backwards to help you and love it. Being okay with that is something I've had to learn. What do you think it is, mate? Is it a generational thing or because, and the only reason I ask that specifically is because even myself growing up
I'd go with my dad and help him with jobs or whatever else. And I remember he said to me once, if someone asked, would you like a glass of water? To say no and continue with the job and just get it done and leave them to the day. And for some reason that always stuck with me.
Yeah. I also think, and I'm guilty of this, by the way, as a parent, we are trying to teach our children to be self-sufficient.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between being self-sufficient and being overly dependent on somebody, right?
Yeah.
And we don't do a particularly good job, and I didn't do a particularly good job, and I'm trying to make up for that now when I talk to people, including my daughter, that says, it's okay to ask for help. That doesn't mean you're dependent on them. And by the way, don't ask for help from someone you wouldn't be very happy to return the favor to at some point in time. Interestingly enough, when I have asked people for help with things, it kind of breaks the ice. You sometimes get those, hey, can you help me in returns? And both of your lives are easier. Funny that.
Yeah.
So I think there's the difference of, we sometimes cross the line of when we're being raised to be self-sufficient, crosses over into this excessive level of independence.
Yeah. It makes sense. I'd like to just quickly give a shout out to tonight's sponsor, if I can, Bob.
Sure, certainly.
Place called Curtain Trends. All you guys and gals, Brisbane, Gold Coast area, all your window furnishing needs. In the spirit of transparency and context, Bob, it's actually my mum and dad's business. Bless them. So they're funding this little show. Mate, before I go into the final plug, and
sure.
I really want to highlight how people go about getting help from you specifically. Sure. I want to quickly go into the 2 truths and a lie that you sent through. So, unfortunately, my co-host Jason couldn't join us tonight.
Sure.
But we were going to go into a 2 truths and a lie. I was going to put him on the spot, but luckily for myself, you haven't told me which one was the lie. So
that's correct. I didn't tell you.
No, I love that. And it's played out perfect. So I'll just fly through them now, mate. So
okay.
Bob's 2 truths and a lie. I've flown acrobatics.
Yeah,
in a
flying acrobats somewhere is different than flying acrobatics. That's true.
That's a different vision right there. But I've flown acrobatics in a World War II fighter plane. Mm-hmm. I recorded 4 songs with my daughter. She singing while I played the saxophone. Mm-hmm. My great grandmother is on the US $1 gold coin. Mm-hmm. Wow. So I'm going to go with you recorded 4 songs with your daughter as a truth. I'm just going to go with process of elimination here. I could be wrong. And then out of the other 2, both fantastic. I'm going to... These are great. These are fantastic. I'm going to go with the flying acrobatics in a World War II fighter plane is the lie. How did I go?
It was an AT-6 Texan. It was
Perfect.
A fighter trainer, and I rolled the aircraft, looped the aircraft, and it was the best thing ever.
Wow.
I can't get a pilot's. I haven't been able to get a pilot's license because I'd gotten hit in the eye as a kid, and I don't have my full peripheral vision. The rules have changed. I can actually do that now. But I've spent as much time as I can getting to fly airplanes with licensed pilots and get to play around. So I actually am pretty decent at flying an airplane. Yeah. And that one was the best. So that is the truth. I have flown acrobatics in a World War II fighter plane.
Wow, that's sounds like it's a highlight, mate. That's for sure.
It was fun. It was great fun.
You got any half plans to get your pilot license?
I'm considering it. Actually, so this will give you, that is something that came into my world as a possibility. The other thing that's come into my world as possibility is playing the saxophone again, because I used to play the saxophone. However, my daughter does sing, and I have never played the saxophone when she's singing. So that's the lie.
Oh, wow. Wow.
That is the lie. My great-great-great-grandmother is Sacagawea, who is the Indian guide for the Lewis and Clark expedition that explored what is now from the Mississippi to the West Coast. Some people know Sacagawea for a completely different reason. In the movie, the Ben Stiller movie, Night in the Museum,
yeah,
if you've seen that movie,
yeah,
Robin Williams plays Theodore Roosevelt in that, and he falls in love with a woman that is an Indian woman in a different diorama in the museum. That's Sacagawea. She was the Indian guide for the Lewis and Clark expedition that explored the west half of the United States after it was purchased from France, called the Louisiana Purchase. She is my great-great-great-grandmother.
Wow.
So there you
I'm
go.
blown away, mate. I am blown away. That's amazing.
Yeah. So it's pretty unique. It's pretty unique.
Yeah, nice. Okay. Well, I can't top that, mate. I'm not going to try to. There you go. I gave it a crack. I was wildly inaccurate. That's fantastic.
That's all right. You had a 1 in 3 chance.
Exactly.
And without any background, and us just meeting recently, you have a pretty decent excuse, actually.
Well, thank you. I'll rest on that, mate. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, mate. There's been
My pleasure.
So much value you've brought, so I really appreciate it. Bob, where do people go if they want help from yourself?
Sure. Emails are fantastic. I am Bob, B-O-B, at intelligentdisobedience.com. So one long word. intelligentdisobedience.com. My website is intelligentdisobedience.com, predictably enough. If you want to reach out to me at LinkedIn, I am one of only 2 Bob McGannons, I think, on the platform. And the other guy doesn't have this really cool white hair. So if you search for Bob McGannon on LinkedIn, you'll be able to find me there as well. And that's probably the easiest ways to get a hold of me.
I love that.
Methods.
And go out and grab the book, ladies and gents. Bob McGann, Intelligent Disobedience, the difference between good and great leaders.
And
Bob,
that's available on Amazon as well. So anybody that goes
it.
out there should be able to pick up a copy of that. So
you got yourself an Amazon affiliate link?
No, actually, because anyhow, long story. No. No, it's not a story we need to tell at a time like this. Anyhow.
Fair enough. All right, Bob. Look, I appreciate it, mate. As I said, ladies and gents, go out and grab the book. You'll get a lot from it. Enjoy your evening, Bob. Again, mate.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Nathan. Take care. Have a good one. Cheers.